All right, good evening, gentlemen, good evening. First of all, apologies to anyone who's tuning into the stream. The stream we said was going to be on YouTube. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for reasons not worth explaining now. God willing, we'll try and figure something out in the future so we can make up for some of the problems with Facebook. But for now, we will continue on Facebook. I highly recommend that everyone take their own copy and they take a pen and they make notes, because we are studying something for the first time in this class that does not have an English translation with it. I am going to be your English translation. So I highly recommend, and for the other things I'm going to be saying outside of the class, etc., that everybody personalize their copy and that they take notes in the margins. I think that would be very, very helpful. Don't feel shy to write on these copies. They are for studying.
People online, what we've seen that they can't.
Yeah, the mimer, L'chaim. We have before us. Could you please bring in a napkin, if you don't mind, something like that? Thank you. We have before us a discourse of the previous Rebbe of Lubavitch, known as the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe Rayatz, Rav Yosef Yitzchak. That's why he's known as the Rayatz. And this is one of his discourses. This is the father-in-law of the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth in the line of Chabad Rebbes. And we are going to be studying a discourse of his. This discourse, as you can see on the first page here, from the first words of the discourse, is known as Naaseh Na, alias Kir Ketana. That's the name of this discourse, Naaseh Na. We'll discuss what that means in a minute. That's the name of the discourse. This discourse was said, if you look at the line here, it says in the middle of the page where you have the break, you have B'siyata Dishmaya, right, with the help of heaven. Hey Tetzaveh, the fifth day of the week of Parshas Tetzaveh. What time of year is that? Right before Purim, always. Right before Purim. This is in the first 9 days of Adar. I'll tell you how I know that in a minute. Reish Tzadik Aleph, Taf Reish Tzadik Aleph. That's 5691, which corresponds to
1920 something.
1931.
Close.
In a place called Rakishki. That's the last line of the preface of the header here. It says Rakishki. Rakishki is the name of a village. Where's Rakishki? Right? You think of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Where should he be saying his discourses? In Lubavitch or later in New York, right? He's saying a discourse in a town called Rakishki. What's the story? The story is there's multiple stories involved with the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe's journey to this town. Basically what happened is the previous Rebbe was living in Riga in Latvia at the time. That's also a long story of how he ended up there. The previous Rebbe's life, I should just preface by saying, the previous Rebbe's life is absolutely fascinating. I mean, you can't think of a more interesting life. And the thing about the previous Rebbe is that unlike pretty much all of the other Rebbes, the previous Rebbe was very open with talking about his own life. Many, many, many stories of his own life, his childhood, growing up, his difficulties, the time that he was in prison. He spoke about and wrote about incommensurately more, infinitely more than any of the other Rebbes ever spoke about themselves. So not only does the previous Rebbe share his life with us, but his life story is unbelievably interesting. He grew up as a small child in the village of Lubavitch, which was and still is essentially a backwater in what is today Belarus. There's nothing there. It's a village in the middle of nowhere. The only thing that was ever there of any significance was the Lubavitcher Rebbes and their teachings and their Chassidus. That's what was in Lubavitch. The previous Rebbe grew up there in the village of Lubavitch, and after he got a little bit older, his father and him, and basically all the Chassidim, were exiled from Lubavitch, thanks to our dear friends, the Bolsheviks. And they ended up in Rostov, where the Frierdiker Rebbe's father passed away. Rostov is a city in Russia, Rostov on Don. That's where the Rebbe Rashab passed away in 1920, I believe, 20 or 21. And the previous Rebbe was then Rebbe from 1920 or 21 until 1950 when he passed away. Right? That's the time that he was a Rebbe. And if you think about it, there was no more tumultuous or difficult time to be a European Jew ever than those years. And the previous Rebbe moved around a lot. He didn't stay in any one place for very long because he couldn't. There were all sorts of troubles, all sorts of people after him. He was imprisoned by Stalin, the whole Maaseh, right? The whole story. Anyway, 1931, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, which I'm going to use the names interchangeably, I hope that doesn't bother anyone. Frierdiker is just the Yiddish word for previous. The previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, Rav Yosef Yitzchak, was living in Riga in 1931, and he received many requests. You get the impression from the language the Frierdiker Rebbe uses that it was like a tide. He received a tide of mail. Like you could just imagine the windows breaking and all the envelopes coming in, right? He received many requests to go and visit this town called Rakishki. Rakishki was a very small shtetl in Lithuania. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the history of Eastern Europe and the Judaism there, but Lithuania was not known for its Chassidic fervor, let's put it that way. Lithuanians were famously anti-Chassidic. They were famously misnagdic, right? They were misnagdim. They were generally, speaking very generally, of course, against Chassidus. However, there was a certain village called Rakishki that was known as the most Chassidish village in Lithuania. Right? This was a village in a sea of opponents of Chassidus. This village was a Chassidic village. And they begged the Frierdiker Rebbe to come and visit him. And Riga is not that far. All of those states, those countries are relatively quite small, right? The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, it's all right in the same area. And so the Frierdiker Rebbe made the journey to this town called Rakishki, and he was there for 9 days. He was there from the 1st to the 9th of the month of Adar in 1931. When he was there, he said 3 Chassidic discourses, and he interacted with, he spoke to, he met with people the whole day long. The whole time that he was there, all he did was meet with Jews. And he had an incredible impact, an incredible influence there. And it was one of the famed events in modern Jewish history in Lithuania. Before the war, was the previous Rebbe's visit to this village called Rakishki. We have before us one of the discourses that he said in this village, right? So if you think about it, I have to tell you something about the Frierdiker Rebbe's Chassidus. I don't know if I'll do this with all the Rebbeim that we're going to be studying my Marim from, but this is directly applicable to what we're learning, so I'll say it. The previous Rebbe, in the style of his Chassidus, right? Now the truth is that who are we and what understanding do we have to really categorize the style of the Rebbeim? We don't really have much standing. These are godly matters. The Maimarim come to the Rebbeim mipi Ruach HaKodesh. They come to them in an encounter with the divine. These are not things to mess with. However, I will tell you 2 facts. That as a student of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimarim, you will generally run into 2 types of discourses. There's 2 types. There are discourses of Haskalah, discourses of Chassidic philosophy, like what we just finished learning, right? Like the second part of Tanya, which discuss the nature of God, deep metaphysics, philosophy, theology, right? The nature of Hashem, the nature of Hashem's unity. If you learn those Maimarim from the previous Rebbe, they are some of the most difficult, abstract, challenging discourses from any of the Chabad Rebbes. Very high level stuff, not helped by the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe's style is very difficult to deal with. The Frierdiker Rebbe's style, as we're actually going to see in our own discourse, is not the style of the Alter Rebbe, who is unbelievably clear, or the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rashab, who's also famous for being unbelievably clear. The Frierdiker Rebbe is specifically not clear. He has a totally different way of writing and of speaking that can make understanding him very challenging. That's one type of his maimarim. One type of his maimarim are very, very deep philosophical discourses. We are studying a discourse from the second type of his maimarim, which are maimarim, powerful, fiery, hartzig, as we would say in Yiddish, from the heart, heartfelt, heartful and heartfelt discourses about Avedas HaChassidus, the worship of God, how to be a Jew at a practical level, the correct way that a Jew should live. These maimarim of the Frierdiker Rebbe are much, much, much simpler. Why this division? Very simply, one way of explaining it, very simply, is that it has to do with who the previous Rebbe's audience was. The Frierdiker Rebbe's father taught Chassidus for years and years in the town of Lubavitch to who? Students in Tomchei Tmimim, students in the Lubavitch Yeshiva. In other words, he was free to speak about matters with no limit of depth because there were people around who were always able to appreciate them, right? You have students who are devoting their whole lives to the study of Torah and the study hours and hours a day to the study of Chassidus. And they would be able to appreciate and to understand what the Rebbe Rashab was saying, the father of the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, as we were discussing before, lived in a time of exile. He was tossed back and forth. He was trying to strengthen Jews wherever he was able to find them, right? Jews under the communists took over Russia, all of a sudden, Jews needed support everywhere, right? It wasn't like the whole system was self-sustaining. They went and rounded up all the rabbis, and now what, right? Therefore, because the Frierdiker Rebbe was so often speaking not to the yeshiva students and not to the cream of the crop of Chabad or Chassidim, but rather to simple Jews, right? Jews who may never have heard any Chassidus before they heard it directly from the mouth of the previous Rebbe. Therefore, how did he speak to them? He spoke to them in language they could understand, simple, direct, in this world instruction for how to serve God. So this mimer, if you think about it, it's like a bridge between worlds. On the one hand, the previous Rebbe is speaking to a world that unfortunately, that whole world is gone, right? The Frierdiker Rebbe is speaking to a shtetl, a Chassidic shtetl in Lithuania, something that unfortunately, thanks to Hitler and Stalin, no longer exists. There's no such thing. This whole world is gone, right? So on the one hand, he's speaking in a way that's pure. As we're gonna hear, the way he describes how a Jew should live is like a vision from somewhere else. On the other hand, this was not like the Alter Rebbe was writing 200 years ago. This was less than 100 years ago, right? It was in a different world, but on the other hand, not such a different world. There were already trains and radios and cars, right? This was a world that is already modern, right? So on the one hand, you have the purity of vision, which feels like something from a different universe. On the other hand, the previous Rebbe is not speaking to a backwards world where no one knew what was going on the next country over. He was speaking to somewhat of a modern world. So you have this beautiful balance, and as I hope we're going to see, I'm not going to be, as you can see how short my notes are, and this is for quite a chunk of the Maimar. I don't know if we're even going to get through everything I have notes for here. On these Maimarim, I really want to read more and let you get the flow of things and also the feel for what the previous Rebbe is saying, because this is like, what we were learning before was something like lahavdil, but almost like a university lecture, right? In terms of its content, very abstract, very challenging, and talking about things that are usually very far beyond the world, right? This is like Chassidic cholent. This is something hot and delicious, and you swallow it, and your whole life becomes warmer. This is the Chassidus that the previous Rebbe brought to Jews who were suffering and struggling and who didn't know anything about Chassidus, right? And the Frierdiker Rebbe came and he gave them life. He reinvigorated their connection with Judaism, right? He was giving them strength in their relationship with God. That's the type of discourse we're going to learn, okay? Now, I just want to say a word about these copies that I've made. We have the first 4 pages, I believe, the first 4 pages are the discourse itself. As you can tell, they're all in the same print. The last page is a source sheet, just for the first section that I've made for us. So I'm going to be referring back and forth to this source sheet, which will help us just a little bit with context, and it also gives you something in English to read, which I thought would be nice for our English readers. All right. Without further ado, gentlemen, let us begin, but not inside. We begin by talking about what it talks about in the book of Malachim. The book of Malachim is the book of Kings. The book of Kings, Second Kings, as they would say in English, Malachim Beis, there's 2 of them. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 of Malachim Beis is where our pasuk, our verse around which this whole discourse is based, comes from. So it pays to know, to not just take it out of context as one line. It pays to know at least a little bit about what it's talking about there. What is it talking about in that chapter? There's 2 very famous stories that you probably already know, you just don't know that they're in that chapter. That chapter is talking about the miracles performed by a prophet whose name was Elisha. Elisha's teacher was Eliyahu Hanavi. Elisha was the student, the prime student, the prophetic student of Elijah, of Eliyahu. Elisha performs 2 miracles in this chapter of the Tanakh. The first miracle that he performs is for a widow. Her husband passes away and she's poor, she can't feed her children. And Elisha tells her very famously, Kelim reikim al tamiti, right? Find a lot of empty pots and pans and amphorae or whatever it is they had back in those days. Similar to the miracle of Hanukkah, very good. And she had just one little bit of oil, and she filled up all of these jugs and all of these vessels. She kept pouring and pouring and pouring, like the Baba Sali at Koshel Bracha, right? Maybe the Baba Sali was like Elisha. I'll leave it to the scholars to figure that one out. And filled up all of the vessels, and she was able to sell the oil, and she and her children were able to live off the proceeds from this oil for their whole lives. Don't worry, that's not what our mimer is about, but there are many Chassidic mimarim about that story. That's a whole own story in its own right. Our mimer comes from a verse in the second half of the chapter, which tells a second story of Elisha, another very famous one, where a woman asks Elisha for a bracha that she should have a child, and she has a child, and that child dies very young, and she comes to Elisha and she says something along the lines of, your bracha was a lemon, you gave me a child but he died young. She said, please come and help my son. And Elisha very famously comes and he lies down upon the son, and the son sneezes 7 times and comes back to life. Very famous story in the in Malachim. So this comes from the second story.
What about the one that he actually took his coat and threw it over the Jordan River, and the river splits? Or
not this one, not this story.
But that was his one as well?
I'm not familiar, I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Baal Shem Tov walking across the river on his gartel.
No.
Is that a different story?
This is Eliyahu that he crossed the river. Because Eliyahu went to...
This is Elisha.
Yeah, but they went together, so there was something there as well.
So if you turn to the source sheet that I gave you, let's read the first paragraph, the second paragraph, and the last paragraph on the page. These are verses 8, 9, and 10 of this chapter of Kings. I'm going to just read them in English. One day Elisha visited Shunem, which is the name of a place. Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to have a meal. And whenever he passed by, he would stop there for a meal. Once she said to her husband, I am sure it is a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. Let us make a small enclosed upper chamber and place a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him, so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us. Right? This isn't the part where the miracle is, but this is the woman who is going to bless with us to have a son, and then bring the son back to life, right? Our whole mimer is based on these verses, right? Not on the miracle that comes after, but on these verses, okay? Specifically, I'm sure it is a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. And then, this third verse, Naaseh Na, Aliyas Kir Ketana, V'nasim Leisham Mita V'shulchan V'chisei Menera, V'haya B'vay Elenu Yasur Shama. right? Let us make a small enclosed upper chamber and place a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us. This is what our discourse is about. How is this what our discourse is about? What does it say about this? Without further ado.
Who made the translation from the English to Hebrew?
I don't know. The person
From English to Hebrew.
Right, no, because I'm laughing because if you would translate it the way it is, somebody's going to come say, wait a second, what are you writing here? It's not even allowed. It's legally not allowed. It says Isha Gdola. That's like, to get this to be a wealthy woman could be something else.
Well, he was politically correct.
But she was married. We know that.
She was big.
No, we should know she was married.
What's written here, she was big.
Gedola in Judaism very often means wealth.
Could be.
Very often does mean.
I'm saying, but could be something else.
Yeah. So, anyway, let's begin this discourse. I'm in the middle of page 328 again. If for those who weren't here, I highly encourage you to take notes because we don't have an English translation of this discourse yet. Without further ado, in the words of the holy Chassidic Rebbe of Lubavitch, Naaseh Na which for the third time means, let us make a small enclosed upper chamber and place a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him, so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us. This that it says, let us place for him there, let us place for him there. Kai adila ilmine. This refers to the previous verse where it says, in other words, who is the verse talking about? Place this there for him. Who is the him? Ki ish elikim kadoshu ever aleinu tamid, which again means a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. The Chassidic Rebbe for the rest of this page mostly is going to be explaining this phrase, Ish Elokim Kadosh, which literally means a holy man of God. As we are going to very quickly discover, this does not mean the prophet Elisha. It meant the prophet Elisha in the pshat of the story. That's who the widow was talking about when the story took place. But in the Torah, which speaks to us beyond time and space, in every time and in every place, in other words, in the Pnimius HaTorah, in the inner Torah, that is not what this verse is saying. What is the verse saying? Continues the Chassidic Rebbe. The Pirush, Ish Elokim Kadosh. What does a holy man of God mean? We should note immediately. I want to note two things for you immediately. Ish means man, but is not the only biblical word for man. It's a precise word for man, as we're going to see. Elokim means God, but it is not the only biblical name of God. There are others' names as well. Both of these words are precise, as is the word Kadosh, which means holy. And so through the precision of these words, of saying what the words mean in their precise language, we can gain deeper insight into what the story of Elisha has to teach us. What is Ish Elikim Kadosh? Hua Ruach Tara, it is the spirit of purity. Sheyesh b'kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael, that each and every Jew has within them. Dezeu over aleinu tamid, and that is what comes this way regularly. Every Jew has a spirit of purity within them that comes this way constantly or regularly. What does that mean? The tamid yesh hashpa milamayla beruach tara. Every Jew constantly experiences a flow from the above of a spirit of purity. In other words, every Jew experiences a constant flow of divine revelation. Every Jew, by virtue of being a Jew, he has a holy and godly soul. Every Jew is constantly experiencing godliness. There is godliness available to us at every moment because of our souls. As is brought in the Tana Devei Eliyahu. Who knows what the Tana Devei Eliyahu is?
What is the question?
The Tana
We said on
Devei
Friday night before
Eliyahu.
the
No, that's something else.
Teachings of
Of the house of Elijah, literally in Aramaic, but the Tana Devei Eliyahu is a midrash. It's a very famous midrash, often brought in Chassidus. It's the name of a specific collection of rabbinic teachings. If you turn to the very last page, if you turn the whole thing over to the very back, at the very top we have this quote from the Tana Devei Eliyahu, chapter 9. It says, "Whether Jew or Gentile, man or woman, slave or maidservant, the divine spirit rests on a person according to his actions." Right? In other words, there are no class or gender or religious or anything like that divisions on whom the Spirit of God rests. It rests upon a person according to their actions. Bein ish ubein isha. Hakol lefi ma'asav shel adam. Everything according to the actions of a person. Ruach HaKodesh alav. Does the Spirit of God rest upon him? So in other words, it seems that although we have an inherent connection to God, the Spirit of God rests on us also in connection with our actions as well, right? How can this be reconciled? We're going to talk about that presently, in a minute. We're going to talk about how there's this spirit of purity is both constantly present and yet requires action to to instantiate or to access it. To access it, there also has to be action, as we will see. V'huva b'yalkut. What's the yalkut?
Shimoni?
Yeah,
No, it's Midrash.
midrash. Another collection of midrashim. Huva b'yalkut pasuk v'devera isha nevia. Devera, Deborah, was a prophetess. Shezachsa lezeh al yidei ha'psila she'asasa lemikdash. That she merited to be a prophetess. Why? Because of the wicks that she made for the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash. The b'meneras HaMishkan isa v'chila era hu tzarich. V'chila era hu tzarich. That regarding the menorah of the Mishkan, you can see already the Chassidic Rebbes style, by the way. I don't know if you could get it from the English translation. In the Hebrew, it's very clear that the Chassidic Rebbe just sort of goes. It's more like poetry, actually, in a way, than it is like an organized discourse. It's extremely organized. It's just that the Chassidic Rebbe leaves it to you to figure out what the organization is. He just goes. Right? Menoras hamishkan isa v'chila era hu tzarich. The Gemara asks about the menorah in the Mishkan. Does God need its light? In other words, why do we light the menorah? Why is there a candlestick in God's house? God can see just fine without the menorah, right? Rather, so continues the Chassidic Rebbe of Inyan era menorah, the whole idea of the candelabrum, the candlestick, the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan, Humashi Yisrael Me'irim Esa Elam Be'er HaTorah. This light is the illumination that the Jewish people bring to the world through the radiance of the Torah, right? V'dvera asasa psilos lemikdash, and Deborah made the wicks for the temple. And in this she merited to prophecy, and she merited also her husband, Lapidot was his name. Hagam shahaya ish pashat, even though he was a simple man. V'zeu ish alekim. And this, how did we get into this whole thing about Deborah and the menorah? Because this is an ish alekim, a man of God. Let's stop there. V'zeu ish alekim, and this is a man of God. So, what have we said so far? So far we've said...
Who's the Zeh?
What? This concept is the man of God. No, not her husband specifically. This concept, this idea, is the man of God. Okay? What do we mean? What do we mean? Every Jew experiences a spirit of purity from above. Right? Every Jew experiences a spirit of purity from above. However, there is also a Holy Spirit which comes upon the person through action. Right? The previous Rebbe is combining these two ideas. These two ideas are working in tandem here. And together they explain to us what is the Ish Elokim Kadosh, the holy man of God, right? we're going to go through this. What is the holy man of God? V'zeu ish elikim. This is what we mean by a man of God. De ish meire al his gabrus hamidos. Man, but specifically the name ish, refers to his gabrus hamidos, the strength of, or the conquering of the midos, the emotional traits. I will direct you again to the source sheet, the first page, the thing that we didn't read before, where it says Hayom Yom, the 4th of Elul. See where I am? I'm going to read this to you in English. In describing the unique qualities of humankind, 4 terms are used. There are 4 words that mean man in Torah. Adam is one word that means man. Adam refers to the quality of mind and intellect. Ish, which also means man, to the quality of heart and emotion. Enosh, which means man, weakness in either intellect or emotion or both. Gever, the last word for man, is who overcomes inner weakness and removes obstacles and hindrances to the attainment of an intellectual or emotional quality. That is, Gever works upon Enosh. The one who overcomes weakness works upon his weakness to elevate him to the plane of Ishar Adam, to elevate him to the plane of emotions, good emotions and good intellect.
Who's higher, Adam or Ish?
This is in descending order. This is in descending order. Adam is higher. This is descending order here. So, we say Ish Elokim Kadosh, the holy man of God. But the word for man is Ish. What does Ish correspond to, as the Hayom Yom teaches us?
Heart and controlling emotions.
It is emotional quality. So when we say man here, when we say Ish, we mean the conquering of the emotions. What are the emotions in this context? This is important to say. We can't just skip over this. When Chassidus says midos, midos literally means measures. The measure of the man, right, is his emotional quality. What do we mean by emotions? The emotions, very simply, as we recently read in Tanya right at the beginning, the emotions are encapsulated by love and fear. There are other emotions, but love and fear they include all the other emotions. What is love and fear? The simplest, like the preschool Chassidus definition of love and fear. Love means I desire to move close to something. Fear means I desire to move further away from something. It's very, very, very simple. Before you get complicated with different levels and different aspects and all sorts of things like that. Midos are, why are they called the measure of a man? Because midos are very much inherent qualities of the soul. They are not the soul itself, but they are built-in qualities of the soul. You could say firmware would be a good analogy, right? There's hardware, which is something that if it dies, the whole thing dies, right? That's the thing, in some sense, the thing itself in this very coarse metaphor. You have software, which runs on the hardware in its regular operation. And then you have something called firmware. Firmware is a type of software that allows all the other software to run, right? It's built in. It's the subcode underneath all the regular code that's running. Right?
The operating system.
Like an operating system. So the love and fear of the soul are things that are very, very, very difficult to change and to work on, which is why, as the Chassidic Rebbes is going to talk about, and as Tanya talks about at length, it is an entire life's work to try and fix, to try and elevate your love and your fear. I'll give you a very brief example that a certain teacher of Chassidus in Morristown said when I was there that struck me as extremely illustrative of the point, right? Very simple. He actually had us do the exercise. I'm not going to make you do the exercise. I'll just tell you what he did, right? He told us to write down a list of our favorite foods and our least favorite foods. Then he said, if I paid you $1 million, could you go a month where you only eat your least favorite foods and you don't eat any of your favorite foods? Everyone said, absolutely, right? Why? Because the eating is an action. Eating is software. right? If I get good enough motivation, I can change my action. It's not so hard, right? It's hard. It may be hard. I may hate what I'm eating. I may hate the taste of it, right? But I can make myself do it if I need to, right? For a great purpose, right? And to extremely distant ends, there are many things I would do with enough motivation, right? Then he said, what if I paid you $10 million? All you have to do is switch the ones that are your favorite with the ones that you hate, right? You have to make the ones that you hate your favorites, and the ones that are your favorites, you have to hate them, in truth, right? And everybody realized that even for $10 million, this is no easy feat, right? That's midos. That's what we mean when we say love and fear and the measure of a man. You love these foods, you fear those foods. You want these, you're drawn to these, you distance yourself from those. Changing a midah, right, is very, very, very difficult, which is why it's called an aveda. That's why it's called work, right? To change your actions is one thing, right? But to change the underlying desire, right, which is very simply, very, very simply, that I should love God more or as much as I love my favorite food, for example, right? Not to act well towards God. That's one thing. There's all sorts of systems. You could do almost anything, right? You could daven every day. You could put on tefillin every day. You do the whole thing. You could say Tehillim every day if I paid you, right? But to actually love God like you love the food, that is a more difficult thing, right? That is why it's the measure of a man. The man is determined by what he loves and what he fears. And much of the Aveda, much of the work, is to change the midos, is to change the very nature of this love and of this fear. So, when we say a man in terms of an ish, what do we mean? We mean someone, a real man in one sense of the word. We mean someone who has conquered his emotions, right? If you think about it, an extremely high name for someone. Just to call someone a man, ish, is an extremely high praise, right, in Torah. Because that's what this name denotes. So, ish Elokim Kadosh, a holy man of God. So we have man. We're talking about a holy person of God who has conquered his emotions, right? What about Elokim? Continues the Chassidic Rebbes. Elokim, what is Elokim? Begematria hateva, a very famous line in Chassidus. Elokim, God's name Elokim, not with a kuf, with a hey. If you try it with a kuf, the gematria won't work. If you do it with a hey, the gematria is, the letter value of Elokim is hateva, which means nature. Elokim is the divine name referring to nature. Which nature? All natures. All set systems, set essences, set natures throughout the creation. The nature of this cup, the nature of gravity, the nature of an electron, the nature of the human soul. All natures, right? The nature of the order of the worlds, right? The nature of the divine world of Bria, for example, right? That nature. Anything that is a nature, which is a system in this sense, and there are Maimarim which struggle with to define this word, nature. It's a very difficult word. It's a whole different discussion. But anything that has a nature, let's call it that for now, anything that has a nature is created through God's name, Elokim. Why? This is why it helps to have learned Shar Yichud V'Emunah before you learn this, right? Why is everything that has a nature created through Hashem's name Elokim? Because as we learned in Shar Yichud V'Emunah, Elokim refers to which trait? The divine Gvura, the divine severity or self-concealment, right? How do all natures arise? By God concealing himself, right? Because God is not a system or a nature, right? God is a being totally above having a nature. All natures derive from the divine self-concealment.
Right, so that's what I wanted to ask.
Now I don't have to give 12 classes on that because we already did Shar Yichud V'Emunah. We already did 12 classes.
No, but the question is that has nature or within the nature?
What do you mean?
There's a difference between something that has nature or something that
What's the difference?
The difference is that when you say nature, then you define everything which is in nature or beyond nature, which is in the nature. Because this is like the global, like the envelope of everything.
I'm not sure I follow.
He said everything that has a nature.
Right, but this is different. As nature, or maybe it's just in the nature.
No. Anything that is in or has a nature, I'm not sure I follow. I don't see the
Because
distinction.
in Hebrew, the word nature is like stamping. This is like why you call it nature, because this is the stamping of God of the world. He made the mountains, he made the seas, he made everything he put a stamp and this is it.
Right, but you understand that we're not talking about nature like a nature walk at the Chattahoochee, a nature reserve, right?
It
That's
doesn't
not what
make
we
it,
mean.
that's what I'm saying.
That's not what we're talking about.
Right, because it doesn't even matter.
Correct.
It's everything which is in it.
No, it's even everything which creates. It's even many of the things which create it,
Some of the
which are
things you
above.
don't even know. Some of the things you don't even see.
I'm telling you, the nature of the world of Bria, the nature of the Malach Michal is a nature. You understand what I'm saying? Teva Hadavar, the essence, the inner way that the thing works because of the category to which it belongs, the form which it has, the way that it behaves. It's not an easy word to define.
Right,
you know how the Alter Rebbe defines nature in Tanya? I think we just read, didn't we just read it? If I'm not mistaken. Or we either just read it or we're about to read it. Where the Alter Rebbe says, what is nature? Nature is the name given to everything that we don't understand.
Right, you call it like Teva
It's just
Adam.
it's just its nature, right? Well, the just its nature, which is at the core of each thing, right? Because each individual thing is ultimately inexplicable. Long story. The just its nature at the core of each thing. All of those natures come from where? The divine name Elohim, the divine self-concealment. Right? It is only by God limiting his expression that any of these natures can arise.
So let me be more, then souls is part of that as well?
What?
The souls?
The souls, yes.
I think the problem is,
There's a sense in which souls transcend nature as well. That's a different story. The souls also have a nature. The soul is a confusing. The soul is a confusing thing. I wouldn't judge anything by the soul because the soul is exceptional. It's like judging. I don't know. It's like judging the economy by Switzerland. You know, it's exceptional. It's not the rule. So you have Ish. Ish is a person who controls their midos, who controls their emotions, and you have Elohim. What type of Ish is he? What type of controlling of his emotions does he have? In a way of Elohim. In other words, he controls not just his emotions, he controls them down to the level of Elohim. He controls and dominates over nature itself, his inner nature, right? Or as the Chassidic Rebbes says, Ish ha-Elohim der was brecht teva umisgaber aleh. One of the advantages of learning the Chassidic Rebbes is you get some Yiddish, which is, again, if you don't get the Yiddish, can you really say that you learn the Maimer? Der was brecht teva umisgaber aleh. That which breaks nature and dominates over it. This is an Ish Elohim. An Ish is someone who controls and masters their emotions. An Ish Elohim is someone who does this to the extent that they are supernatural. They dominate over their own nature in this sense. Hine Kadosh. And what is Kadosh? What does the word Kadosh mean? Hu shehu muvdal. It means holy, but what does holy mean? Holy means separate. Holy means above, transcendent, sacred, right? Therefore, you have an Ish Elohim Kadosh. The holy man of God, which I've written down here. What is the holy man? The holy man of God is a literal translation. It refers to Elisha the prophet. What's the Chassidic Rebbe's translation of this phrase altogether? A pure spirit constantly coming our way to allow for the breaking of our natural emotions. Right? You have a holy, it is a spirit within every Jew allowing for the conquering of their natural emotions. That is what an Ish Elohim Kadosh is. And what does it do? Continues the Chassidic Rebbe. Ever Olenu Tamid. It is constantly
Hover over us.
coming our way. Ulazais. And therefore, so in the simple story, this woman who's wealthy sees that there's a holy man of God constantly coming her way, so she builds him basically a place to stay on top of her house, right? Right, an attic of sorts. The actual nature of this attic is a discussion in the Gemara, which I thoroughly do not, on my very cursory reading, did not understand. But there is Gemara on this. The Talmud does discuss this verse and the nature of this attic. Ulazais. So when you see the Ish Elokim Kadosh coming, when you see the holy man of God coming, when you see the spirit of purity allowing us to break our natural emotions coming, what do? You do the first verse of our mimer. Naaseh Na alias kir katana. You make for it a small enclosed upper chamber, and you put in that chamber a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. Why? So that he can stop there whenever he comes to us, right? You have a connection to God that is constantly coming down and, so to speak, shining upon your soul. You have a spirit of purity which is available to you, says the Chassidic Rebbes. What should you do for it? So this verse of the Tanakh tells us what we should do with that spirit that is constantly shining upon us, that spirit of purity. We should build for it a little room. You should build within yourself a little room for this spirit of Hashem, a vessel, exactly. Why? Continues the Chassidic Rebbe. The haruach hatara yiyeh behisyashvus. In order that the spirit of purity should be settled. You have to give it a place to settle. In other words, what do we immediately say here? This itself is an entire life lesson from Chassidus. What we've just read now is an entire life lesson from Chassidus that you can miss. What's the starting point of the Chassidic Rebbe's argument, right? Most people's starting point is, I want to connect to God, but I have no connection. What should I do? The Chassidic Rebbe is saying, wrong question. Wrong question. You as a Jew, as a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have within you a constant connection to a spirit of purity. You have something transcendent and godly within you, no matter who you are, no matter what you did, right? So what is it that depends on your actions? Simply, you have to make a home for. You have to allow that spirit to settle, right? In the famous words of the Alter Rebbe, and as we've discussed in this class many moons ago, everyone was a little bit younger. I guess any time in the past, everyone was a little bit younger. But the Alter Rebbe says that the problem with faith, which is exactly what we're talking about, a faith connection to God that the soul always has. The problem with it is that faith, if you don't work on it, doesn't dwell within the person. It's not behisyashvus, this exact term. It doesn't dwell, it doesn't affect us. The famous example the Alter Rebbe brings from the Gemara, in the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov, is Ganva afum machtarta rachmana karya, that the thief at the opening of the tunnel, before he goes to do his thieving, he prays to God for success, right? Which is a form of religious hypocrisy. But the Alter Rebbe is not saying that there's something wrong per se with religious. In other words, religious hypocrisy is a good sign in a sense. Hypocrisy in general is a good sign. What's the good sign of hypocrisy? You can't be a hypocrite if you don't have a principle, right? You can't be a hypocrite if you don't have an ideal, right? So the thief who's praying for success in thieving, at least he has an ideal. The problem is, he believes in God and he prays to him. The problem is that ideal has not transformed him at all, right? He has an ideal, but that ideal, and he sees that reality, that God is real. Otherwise, he wouldn't pray for success. In other words, he believes God is so real that God can affect the success of his thieving tonight. But that reality has not changed his middos, right? God is real, but what do I like? I like stealing, right? God is real, but I like what I like, essentially, is what the thief at the entrance of the tunnel says. Says the Chassidic Rebbe, what therefore is our responsibility to do with the faith? The faith is not enough. Every Jew has within them an experience of God, a fundamental axiom of Chassidus. One of the first things you learn in Tanya, right? Every Jew has a godly soul. Every Jew has a fundamental connection with God. What's the problem? The problem is that you haven't yet built for it this little place inside you, this little attic with all of the accoutrements, where it can live, right? You haven't built a place where that can dwell within you. So you can be an Ish Elokim. You have the potential within you. You have you're constantly streaming, would be our metaphor nowadays, right? Like Spotify or something, or Netflix. You're constantly streaming from God a Ruach Tara, a spirit of purity. How pure and holy is it? It has the ability to control and dominate and break your own nature, the nature of your middos. You can love God as much as you love anything in this world. You have that potential. That light is constantly shining upon you by dint simply of your heritage. You were born a Jew, you have that light. That potential is open to you, right? What's the problem? The problem is that light shines on you and bounces right off. There's nowhere to hold it. You haven't made in your life you haven't made in here a little spot where that light can constantly shine and transform you as a person. So the Aveda, that we're going to discuss the rest of this mimer, right? What we have to do is only the second step. The first step is never to despair. Never ever forget that this light is shining on you. You don't have to forge the connection. God is offering the connection already. The connection already exists. It's not how do I create a connection with God, it's how do I access the connection I already have. That's the first lesson, right? But it's not enough just for it to be there. We want it to change us. That's really the trick. The haruach hatara yebes yashvus. We want the spirit of purity to be settled, the ya'ir b'chol inyanav, and to illuminate all of our matters, she'esek b'inyanei ha'elam, especially the matters where we toil with worldly things, right? Even when we are not in the middle of prayer and studying Torah, we want this light to affect us. We want it to affect us even when we're at work. V'hinei. Yes?
Question.
Sure.
So, let us make a small enclosed chamber.
Yeah.
That's us. So the wife is talking to the husband, but what you're describing is we as an individual.
Yes, correct. Exactly. In other words, this is a very common, you should understand, this is a very common way that Chassidus is taught. In other words, this is called a drush. A drush literally means an exegesis. I don't know how you pronounce the word. Exegesis. Exegesis sounds like the wrong religion. I'm uncomfortable, but you take a text, right? And the thing is, in Judaism, as we know, texts all operate on at least 4 levels, right? There's Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. There's the simple, the hinted, the systematic learning through rules, and the hidden esoteric meaning, right? And the Chassidus goes immediately to the esoteric. In other words, that whole preface about Elisha, right? The student of Chassidus, you theoretically, you don't even have to know that story. I'm just telling you that story because it seems tragic to me to just learn the pasuk and not know anything that's going on in the context to learn the verse. But the Chassidic Rebbes never mentions Elisha. The famous example of this is in the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe, a very famous Maimer, Purim Maimer, where it says, the verse says, he begins the Maimer, he says, Esther fell at the feet of Achashverosh, right? And immediately the Alter Rebbe asked, but it's known that Malchus has no feet, right? The divine trait of kingship has no feet. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is not even seeing the literal meaning of the words, right? It's directly to the spheres, directly to the godliness, right? Achashverosh, the king, obviously is a reflection of, is a light shining from the divine trait of kingship, and that divine trait of kingship has no feet. So I don't understand the verse. That is an opening question, right? So similarly here, in other words, Elisha, the story with Elisha is the pshat, is the simple level. Chassidus is seeing through to the esoteric. It's seeing through to the eternal teachings of these verses above time and space, essentially. Okay, let's go a little bit, well, we actually have some time. Let's go a little bit further. Okay. V'hinei. Those who are following with me in the text line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of the page. V'hinei, l'havin zeh ba'aveda b'nefesh ha'adam. To understand how we make this home for the spirit of purity in our worship of God, in our soul. Hine Isa, it is brought, B'Zayar Chelek Beis Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. It is brought in the Holy Zohar. I have a little paragraph of it on the text sheet. We're not going to read it inside because it says very much what we're about to say. It says in the Zohar, Demita Shulchan Kisei Umenera Hem Daled Tikuna Shchinta. These four objects, this mimer is organized, the rest of this mimer is organized around this four objects, right? You have to build a home for God. How did they do it? By placing these four objects, the bed, the table, the chair, and the lamp, right? So that in our worship of God, we also must place these four objects, and we're going to go into each one of these objects in detail. What it means to spiritually place this object and make that home for that spirit of purity, right? These are called in the Zohar the Daled Tikuna Shchinta, the four reparations of the divine spirit, right? The divine presence.
Reparations?
Yeah, reparations, tikkunim, repairs, fixings, the four ways of fixing the divine presence, right? Umavur sham ba'arichos, and it's explained there at length. V'hamura mikola amur, and the summary of everything that it says there, the Chassidic Rebbes is going to give to us now. Hu damita hu tfilas arvis, the bed is the evening prayer. The shulchan kisei u'menorah tzloisa de shacharis, and the table, chair, and lamp are the tzloisa, the prayer of shacharis, the morning prayer. The bed is the evening prayer, and the table, chair, and lamp are the morning prayer. And now he's going to subdivide them. They're all, so three things are in the morning prayer. What are the three things? Shulchan, table, hu psuke de zimro birchas kriya shema, refers to the verses of praise and the blessings before the Shema, right? So it is the section in the Siddur between Baruch She'amar, between and including Baruch She'amar, up to the Shema, right? That is the table, that part of the prayer that we say in the Siddur. Kisei, the chair, kriya shema, is the reading of the Shema. We're going to explain why these objects correspond to these things at great length. Umenera tefillah shmona esrei, and the lamp is the silent amida, the silent prayer in the morning. Okay, so that's going to be what the rest of our mimer is. How do you build the home for this spirit of Hashem? Through davening, through prayer. However, as we are going to see, the prayer is it's not about reading the words. That's not what he means by prayer. Prayer is not about showing up to the synagogue and reading the words. Prayer is something much, much more profound. Again, this is how you allow the Spirit of Hashem to transform you to your very core. This is how prayer as a means to total self-transformation into a godly human being. But the first question is, does the verse not say, I speak to you, God, evening, morning, and afternoon? Shehem gimel tfiles, shacharis, mincha, v'arvis, which are the three prayers, shacharis in the morning, mincha in the afternoon, and arvis at night. What's the Chassidic Rebbe's question?
Where's
Mincha? Mincha is missing. The afternoon prayer is not among the four objects. The bed was the evening prayer, and the other three, the table, the chair, and the lamp, are all the morning prayer. What happened to the third prayer in Judaism? The afternoon prayer, right? Exactly. V'yadua, and it's known, the gadla mailas tfilas mincha al sharei tfilas. It's known that mincha is actually the most precious, is the best of all the prayers in several ways. There's the well-known teaching that mincha is important because you have to interrupt your day to pray it, right? So in other words, the time is very pressing. There is also, in a sense, even in a simpler explanation, that the day always ascends in holiness in Judaism, right? When's the holiest time of Shabbos? Shalashudis, right? Right at the very end, before nightfall, is the holiest time of every day. So in the worship of the order of the Jewish day, it's ascending. You start with Ma'ariv, then Shacharis, then Mincha. Mincha is the natural culmination of the day. As the third and final prayer in the Jewish day, it is the natural culmination, the natural holiness. Mincha is, in Judaism, the greatest of the three prayers, in a sense. So, Ma'ala Tfilas Mincha, Al Shari Tfilas Arvis Shacharis, it's greater even than Ma'ariv and Shacharis. Uchamaimer Lo'ila Me Adam Zari B'Tfilas Mincha, as the famous saying of the sages goes, a person should always be careful to pray Mincha. The imkain lama ena chushva. Why then is it not chushva, I think? Then why is it not mentioned in our 4 objects in building the home for God, right? Ach, says the Chassidic Rebbe, however, he hanaisenes, or as we would say in Yiddish, in Aramaic, ha-gufa. You've just answered your own question. Why is mincha not mentioned? Because it is the highest of the prayers. Ki gadla mailas lias ki gadla mailas tfilas mincha lechein hine adala tikunim mita shulchan kisur menera hem hachana el tfilas mincha. Because mincha is so great, these 4 things are the preparations for mincha. Right? In other words, where is the actual piece de resistance? Exactly where you expect it to be, in the afternoon prayer. What are these 4 things we are discussing to make the room for that spirit of purity? These are the 4 steps of preparing for the greatest prayer of the day, which is mincha. In other words, you prepare for the greatness of mincha. How? Through Ma'ariv and Shacharis. Through the bed, which is Ma'ariv, and the table, the chair, and the lamp of Shacharis of the morning prayer.
So mincha's the walls and the floor and the ceiling?
No. We'll see. We'll talk about mincha. The tzarich lahavin. We'll stop at the end of the paragraph, God willing. This won't take very long. Tzarich lahavin. Ma'u inyan tfilas ha-mincha bichlal. We have to understand, what is mincha? Good question. And what does it mean in our personal worship of God? Actually, let's stop here. This is good. We'll continue. We'll stop here. Yeah. We're good. We're out of time. We're good. We'll stop here.
I don't like it.
We'll stop here. We'll stop here, God willing. I'll put my name on this one. And we will continue, God willing, next week. Emir Hashem, gentlemen, onwards and upwards. We should have many good classes studying these Avedic Memorim, our new section, God willing. It should be a good start.
Amen. Amen. It's very much different than what